The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. That was Howard Phillips Lovecraft. My name is Kevin, and this is History Goon. So, sorry to disappoint. I am not doing an H.P. Lovecraft episode yet. He's on the list because he was a weird bastard. Also had a very interesting named cat. So we're not going to talk about that part, though. Anyway, what we're doing this week is we haven't gotten weird in a little bit. It's been since like Halloween that we got weird. So this week we're going to go to the Great White North and explore weirdness in the wilderness of Canada. During the harsh Canadian winter of 1930, battling falling snow and the biting cold, a weary fur trapper named Joe LaBelle went in search of a safe haven. When he came to the Inuit village of Lake Anjikuni, all was eerily silent. Where in previous visits he had enjoyed the warmth and company of a busy and bustling community, now there was only an empty village. Which is very strange because if you have somewhere established, especially like out in the middle of nowhere like that, you don't just up and leave it. You know, there's towns like that in Alaska also, like old mining towns that are abandoned, but this isn't that. Upon investigation, he found fires still burning, food stocks intact, and the villagers' belongings in place. Yet as the search continued, it became clear that the people of Lake Anjikuni had vanished. Stranger still, even the dead disappeared from their graves. Is that part true? I don't know. I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. That would be very strange if you're just going to abandon ship, basically, but you're going to dig up all your dead first. That part's a little weird to me. But again, this whole thing is going to be weird because I've got more than one story. So began one of Canada's most remarkable mysteries, one that continues to haunt the vast North Wilderness to this day. Claiming the title of the second largest country by sheer mass, Canada has a population of fewer than 40 million people. And I believe it's like somewhere between 70 and 90% of the Canadian population lives within like 100 miles of the US border. But then again, if you look at some of the provinces in Canada, they're huge and in the Arctic Circle, where you're not supposed to go there. God doesn't want you to live there. That's why he made it that cold, way like that far north. There's only one dude that lives all the way up there, and he's got like reindeer and stuff. But I mean, much of the landmass is extremely isolated or completely uninhabited. Lake Anjikuni is located in the province of Nunavut, which is home to the most northern continuously inhabited place in the world. ADD break. I'm curious what that one is because I don't know. So we're back from our little ADD adventure. The town of Alert is the northernmost place continuously inhabited on Earth, and it's a little over 500 miles from the North Pole. That's pretty far up. I mean, it's the weird thing is it's only 100 feet above sea level. But I mean, is there sea that far north, or is it all frozen? I'm not an earth scientist. I couldn't tell you. So it's kind of fitting that this story comes from a place that's so far away from civilization. Along the shores of Lake Anjikuni, the Inuit people made their homes. Connected to the Kazan River, what first attracted the Inuit people here to this area was the incredible amount of fish, especially trout and pike, both of which are very hardy fish for cold water. We have, like, you can catch, like, where I'm at, yeah, it gets cold. It's not, 500 miles from the North Pole cold. But you can yank some giant pike out of the lakes up here in the winter. I don't ice fish because I think I don't know. Never been a big fan of being like, hey, let's go out and drill a hole in ice and stand over it. I'm cool. I'll just wait till it's warm and drink beer and fish that way. Thanks. But this is also a part of Canada where we start getting into very interesting supernatural things. We're kind of in the area where you'd start running into legends of the Wendigo, which is not where we're going here. I don't know. We don't know because it's a mystery. It's called the mystery of Lake Anjikuni for a reason because nobody knows what it is. Then one cold night in November 1930, the stories faded and a terrible silence descended upon the village. During that particularly hard winter, fur trapper Joe LaBelle was exploring the northern part of the country when he decided to seek shelter. He was no stranger to the area. Lake Anjikuni, in particular, was a pretty active spot for trappers and fur traders. But upon entering the village, all LaBelle found was silence. After an initial search, it soon became clear that the village had been abandoned in a hurry. He found a fire still smoking with a fresh stew cooking over it. When he moved to inspect the dwellings of the villagers, he discovered weapons, large stocks of food, and their belongings still all in place. So nothing's been tipped over, nothing's missing where there'd be like any kind of evidence that there was something sitting there. There's nothing like a print in the snow where somebody pulled a rifle butt up out of it and walked off with it. As to the whereabouts of the approximate 30 men, women, and children that called the village home, LaBelle found zero trace. Suspecting something terrible had happened to the villagers, and knowing full well that they would never desert a perfectly habitable place for no reason, or leave behind resources, which, I mean, you're not in a resource-rich environment that far north. You're kind of scrounging together. And to, like, hit on that point again, he found a storehouse that was still full of smoked trout. So if these guys were going to leave quick, fast, in a hurry, they would at least take that stuff that's already preserved that you can eat for weeks. LaBelle then went looking for evidence of their sudden departure, but he found no footsteps or prints in the snow. Despite the promise of food and shelter, he could not bring himself to stay in the deserted village and hiked to the nearest telegraph station to send word. Hours later, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived. As the Mounties traveled to the village, they were joined by trapper Armand Laurent and his two sons. It could be Laurent, it could be Laurent, I'm not sure. I'm going to go with Laurent because it sounds more like a hockey player. Also, decided to be a good idea. I'm doing a Canadian episode to wear my best Bret Hart shirt that I could find. Because, he's the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. Some people will understand that reference. Others won't, but that's okay. But they asked Laurent and his sons if they had seen anything odd in the area recently, to which Laurent admitted that he had seen a mysterious gleaming object in the sky a few days earlier. He said the object was airborne and was capable of changing shape, and that it was headed in the direction of Lake Anjikuni when he saw it. The RCMP troop arrived in the town where they met with LaBelle. While there, they were able to confirm his strange account and make a few discoveries of their own. On the outskirts of town, in the village burial grounds, they found open and empty graves. The desecration of a resting place for a body is not only an illegal act in most communities, but also considered a pretty heinous thing to do, especially with native folks. They take that stuff very seriously. Which is why the joke of, the Indian burial ground exists, where, I opened a business and it just fell apart within, 2 months. Must have built it on an Indian burial ground. It's cursed land, not like Pet Cemetery, where that's the gist that they're trying to get to with Pet Cemetery. It's actually a Wendigo in that. Spoiler alert for a book that came out in 1983, or a movie that came out in 1989. But if you haven't seen or read Pet Cemetery by now, that's your fault. Just saying. Not the new one. Don't do the new one. It's not bad, but it's not I mean, you get Herman Munster in the first one. It's really good. And that creepy little kid. Ugh. Anyway, that movie is the reason that I do want a giant gray cat, though. Um, the Mounties did not believe that it was the work of animals that were, grave robbing, considering the ground was frozen solid because it's 500 miles from the North Pole, and it tends to do that. And with the ground as frozen as it was, animals couldn't dig it up. You couldn't dig it up by hand. You would have to have tools. And they found no tool marks anywhere. No shovel marks, nothing like that. No pick marks. And the presence of stacked rocks next to each grave only added to their suspicions. The Mounties immediately ordered a search party for the missing villagers, but failed to find any evidence of where the missing folks were or what happened to them. They did, however, discover a pack of dogs on the outskirts of the village that had died of starvation before being covered in snow, which is sad. This discovery pretty obviously unnerved the police and the trappers, considering massive stores of food and shelter were only a handful of meters from where the dogs had been reported dead. Some historical researchers later claimed the dogs had been tied up where they were found. I don't really know. So that kind of leaves the question of how did they die so quickly when the village had only been abandoned for a couple of hours, Because you used to have fires burning, you used to have food on fires cooking. You can't starve to death that quick. As if that tale wasn't strange enough, RCMP officers stated that they saw mysterious pulsing lights in the sky above Lake Anjikuni while they were out investigating that night. Lights in the sky of northern Canada is not unheard of. I mean, it's pretty common for the aurora borealis or the northern lights to be seen there because you're so far north and the skies are very clear and you get a much better view of it than you do most other places. But these search and rescue guys have seen these before, but the lights that they're seeing now are completely alien, for lack of a better term, to them. The lights they saw were on the horizon. They were bluish and pulsing, very, very dissimilar to the northern lights. And again, just like everything else with this case, the lights were never explained. After a long investigation, the RCMP officers used berries found nearby to determine that the village had been gone for almost 2 months. So this brings up another question. Who's been using the village site if everybody was gone for 2 months, and why are they there? Where are they now? Where did they go? The first press account of the ordeal appeared in the newspaper La Paz, Manitoba, where reporter Emmett Keller first published a story on the disappearance in November of 1930. Shortly thereafter, another newspaper, the Danville Bee of Quebec, published the story as well. The report that propelled the case into the national spotlight was the article published in the Halifax Herald that named the abandoned location the Village of the Dead in its headline. From there, stories circulated to countless newspapers crossing the continent before eventually fading from common consciousness. In 1959, author Frank Edwards included the story in his book Stranger Than Science. This earns the attention of the RCMP, who now claimed that the event never even happened and that Edwards made it all up to improve book sales. The problem here is a lot of people agree that Edwards more than likely embellished much of the story for his book. The fact remains that there are documented press accounts from the 1930s about this disappearance of everyone in this village. And in those accounts, I would think that during the interview, they'd go, hey, who are you that's telling me this story? Oh, I'm John Smith and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So now you have a record that they've actually investigated. And they're just going, nah, didn't happen. Oh, and there's also the small matter of the records of 2 investigations carried out by the RCMP on the event, with the second one taking place in 1931. So probably just a few months later. So now with interest starting to come back up in the case, research starts up again into the 2 separate investigations. So in the secondary investigation, it's discovered that LaBelle was pretty new to the Northern Territories and not the seasoned trapper that he claimed to be. It also came to light that Emmett Keller was well known to be a sensationalist journalist who had often written stories about the wild North for the sake of a dramatic headline. The final word on the matter paints LaBelle as an inexperienced trapper that didn't have the knowledge or experience to know what he saw at the abandoned village, and that the initial newspaper report was largely based on Keller's wild imagination and hearsay. The RCMP ruled the disappearance as a seasonal or permanent abandonment, given the nomadic nature of the Inuit people. They did note that it was odd for them to leave behind their weapons and provisions, though, because it is. If you're going to leave seasonally, you don't leave your there. You take everything with you because you never know what's going to happen. A lot of people don't take the Mounties' official stance with much credence, which kind of left the case wide open to some colorful alternative conclusions. A popular theory passed around by UFO enthusiasts is largely based upon the account of the RCMP officers who witnessed the strange lights in the sky during the initial investigation. That and the odd flying objects reported by the Lorentz. They speculate that the Inuits were the victim of a mass alien abduction taken directly from their homes. Other theories delve into the Inuit core belief system of like evil spirits that are in their pantheon. Well, the Wendigo is a very tempting option, considering it's over the years become like the patron forest monster of Canada. Some believe the Inuit sky god Torngrusk was responsible, and I probably butchered that because I don't speak Inuit. If something otherworldly was indeed involved, if it was going to be something supernatural, a lot of people think that it would have been that. Another popular theory is that some of the members of the village were somehow pulled into another dimension. And I love that. I love all this goofy supernatural. It's so much fun. And I say goofy. It's not necessarily goofy. Because I do believe in a lot of this stuff, like personally. I'm not just saying that to, justify the fact that I'm doing a weird supernatural episode. I actually do believe in a lot of this stuff. I believe that there is enough evidence of it throughout history, and there's been stories about all these different things told by every culture in the world. There has to be something to it. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. And I know that I bill myself as a history show. It's in the name of the show. But sometimes the two can be the same thing. I mean, look at like Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Almost every single Native American culture had stories about that before white folks got here. Throughout America, Canada, hell, you can go overseas. They've got stories of things like that in China, Vietnam, Korea, England, Scotland. They're everywhere. Stories like that come from everywhere. So, in my brain, that means one of two things. Either A, they were real and our ancient and maybe not so ancient ancestors dealt with them somehow. Or B, at some point in time, all of these cultures found themselves in the same place. And somebody started telling a story about this thing. And then somebody was like, hey, have you ever heard of these things called dragons? They're like lizards that can fly and they breathe fire. And like, no, I've never heard of that. That's a cool story, though. And then something happened and they got to go back to where they came from. And they started spreading those stories. Honestly, personally, I would say probably the first one is more reasonable for a lot of people. But I don't know, it's hard to say. Because I don't think that every single culture has made up stories about something like this to try to scare white folks. Anyway, so as is often the case, the truth about what really happened at Lake Anjikuni is completely distorted. Time passes, facts have given way to fiction in some instances, making the distinction between fact and fiction almost impossible. The story at its heart remains a very odd one to tell with no real conclusion, either rational or supernatural, if it even happened in the first place. The fate of the missing villagers is a popular ghost story to share around a campfire, especially when told under the night sky in the wilds of the Canadian North. So, I've got one more still that we're going to go through. And this one is a little bit different because this one is kind of scary, to be completely honest. Just a quick 30-hour drive north from Vancouver, British Columbia, tucked into the southwest corner of the Northwest Territories, sits the nearly 12,000 square mile Nahanni Valley, which, in the grand scheme of things, is roughly the size of Connecticut and Massachusetts combined. That's a pretty good-sized area. Probably less people up there that refuse to use blinkers when they're driving, though. Looking at you guys, Mass and Connecticut. It's ski season, and I see you all over the place now. I know they don't take the blinkers out at the factory. Figure it out. And also, if you're going to do 55 miles an hour through the snow, like on the roads headed to the ski resorts, the least you can do is the speed limit on dry roads in town. Thank you. Cutting its way through the valley is the Nahanni River, which is one of the few rivers in the world that was there before the surrounding cliffs and mountains. As the river flows, it ends up dumping through a waterfall twice the height of Niagara Falls, so it's about 220 feet. The closest major city to this remote area is Yellowknife, with a population of 20,000, and the only way to gain access to the park is via multi-day hike, boating, or by plane. So you want remote. There you go. Considering there's like streets in New York City that have more people that live on them than the population of the next big town to this place, you're out in the middle of nowhere at that point. You can tell shortly after arriving that this is not a friendly place. Overland trails are frequently impassable. Boats are often smashed into the rocks and capsized on the raging river due to the unpredictable bends. And planes have a tendency to crash into the surrounding peaks, which has earned them the ominous nickname, the Funeral Range, which is pretty metal, actually. Due to all of this, the area is obviously uninhabited and remarkably untouched for the most part. That's not to say that no one has ever lived there, because a tribe called the Naha used to live there, kind of like back in the day. And the only reason that any record of the Naha exists is because of the Dene people. The Dene and Naha were not buddies. Believe it or not all the Native American tribes in North America were holding hands and singing Kumbaya and stuff before white people got here and ruined everything. Most of them were incredibly violent to each other. And again, that's something that your history teacher's not going to tell you because they're not supposed to. Because they're supposed to have been a peaceful people. But they weren't. They were all killing each other for a very long time. Told you before, I'm not gonna whitewash history to make people comfortable. I'm going to tell you the exact truth about stuff. They told stories about the Naha coming down out of the hills at night, kidnapping women and decapitating anyone who got in their way. Very peaceful, folks. So here's the thing. The Dene had finally had enough, and they sent a group of their best warriors to the Nahanni Valley, where they surrounded the camp of the Naha. As they watched from the tree line, they saw a cook fire still burning and steam rising from bowls of food. The warriors crept down into the camp and started pulling the flaps on teepees to find nobody. There was no one at all in the camp except the Dene warriors that had just gotten there. The Dene started getting the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and they bolted back home, now knowing that this place is bad news. Maybe it's because of this little incident that the Dene are said to avoid the Nahanni Valley in general. Between that and the legends of giants that cooked their meals in the hot springs, and the tribe of giants that were led by a beautiful woman, maybe that's another reason that they don't go there. This is also another very good area for some tales of the Wendigo, which we're going to get into that, just not in this episode, because that deserves its own, because there is a enormous history of Wendigo stories and sightings and encounters and all that. They maintain that there is something bad in this stretch of woods. Specifically, they say that there's something bad along a certain 200-mile stretch of the river where canyon walls swallow the shoreline and blot out the sun. There, caves dot the rocks like pupils, their shadows hiding whatever might be looking out. Now, I bet you're probably wondering, why would anyone venture out into this area in general? One word, gold. From 1896 to 1899, 100,000 people set out for the Yukon chasing the tales of riches. The trip was so brutal that only 30,000 of them made it, and those that did make it found that there was scant gold to be had, only mud, mosquitoes, and disease. Foolhardy as those who attempt the Klondike were, few were so foolhardy as to attempt to go through the Nahanni Valley. But, of course, some of them did, and that's why we have stories about it. And when it became clear that there wasn't a lot of gold in the Yukon, a few dared to look there instead. People, as it turns out, never learn lessons. You don't listen to the natives, and that's a problem. The two most famous or infamous Nahanni Valley gold seekers were brothers Willie and Frank McLeod. After a tip from a mysterious man named Little Nahanni, who flashed them a watch and chain supposedly made of Nahanni gold. The McLeods ignored warnings about how dangerous the area of the valley was, and instead they went in to seek their fortune. That's what we call in the business foreshadowing. They scanned the river for weeks and found nothing. Maybe the tales of gold were a little over-exaggerated. Maybe there was no gold at all. Finally, after passing through that long, towering expanse of canyons, the black caves looking silently down, the brothers spotted something glittering along the shoreline. Big, fat chunks of gold. Hundreds of giant gold nuggets. It was unlike anything the brothers had ever seen. It was as if it had appeared by magic. Ecstatic, Willie and Frank pulled ashore. Sifting quickly, they packed their boats to the brim. This is it. They found it. They hit it rich. They're never going to have to work another day in their lives. They've got it all now. They turned their boat around, eager to get home and get to spending some of that gold. But, just as they were leaving, the rapids picked up. After weeks of managing the river successfully, it suddenly proved too much for them. Their boat smashed against the rocks, water rushed in, washing away all their precious gold. They lost not only gold, but also their survival gear. Hungry and half-drowned, the brothers faced a decision. Continue with what scant gear they had left, or go home and regroup. After what I would imagine was a heartbreaking decision, they decided to go home. But this didn't dampen their enthusiasm to go back and try it again. It made them more obsessed with the valley than ever. They begged their brother Charlie to come back the next time they went. If he did, they could all be rich. So Charlie, realizing how obsessed his brothers were with this valley and how they kind of downplayed the difficulty of getting there, he said, no, I'm not going. But Willie and Frank gathered new gear, hitched their packs, and in 1906 went back into the woods without their brother. A year passed. Charlie assumed that Willie and Frank they must have hit the jackpot, and they're working to make the most of it. They'd have to be home soon, right? It's been a year. Then another year passes. Maybe Willie and Frank ran into some trouble. Charlie worried over the perils of the Nahanni Valley that had made him hesitate in the first place. And the thing that scared him the most was the crevices, the sinkholes, the animals that could tear you to bits. Charlie finally sets out with a search party. After a long stretch of nothing, the team spotted a camp and some spruce trees along the left bank of the Nahanni, not far from the second canyon. The Nahanni Valley River like that has 4 canyons. Charlie rushed ashore. The camp is empty, but there was a message written on a broken dog sled runner. Quote, "We have found a fine prospect." If they had found gold and they'd brought it back with them, Charlie didn't know where it was. There was no sign of the, quotes, ribbons of nuggets that his brothers had raved about. Charlie and his men fanned out, hoping to find some clue as to where Frank and Willie went. Then someone calls out. They have 2 corpses. In some version of the story, they're tied to a tree, which that one to me would mean, oh, they got robbed. You know, another prospector was up here and he thought that they had gold, so he wanted to rob them, so he tied them to a tree and they just died there. And another telling of this, one is on the ground while the other is halfway into the tent with its hand extended to a rifle that it would never touch. Both men had been decapitated. The heads were nowhere to be found. That incident alone was enough to give the area of the Nahanni Valley new names like Dead Man Valley, Headless Creek, or the Headless Range. But the McLeods were only 2 in a string of uncanny deaths and disappearances. As a matter of fact, the list of similar events is so long that it's almost comical to try to go through the whole thing, especially when you try to keep in mind how few people actually visit this area. So just to run through some of these incidents kind of quickly, they include the incident with Swiss prospector Martin Jorgensen, who followed the McLeods in search of gold, as would many prospectors after them, and none of them ever found it. Spoiler alert. In 1917, his cabin was found burned to the ground, his body laying nearby, headless. In 1926, a woman named Anne Lefert disappeared from her hunting party overnight. Another hunter in the area was startled awake by a weird splashing in the river. He looked out of his tent to see a woman that matched Lefert's description. She was completely naked, scrambling up the hillside on all 4s. Rocks skittered down and splashed into the river as she went. That freaks me out. Seeing videos of people running around on all 4s, it hits that like uncanny valley part of my brain where I'm like, there's something not. I know you're just playing around and having fun, but there's something not right about that. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies, something fierce. When she turned her face towards him, he shrunk back. Her expression was horribly wrong, like a woman possessed. The hunter returned to his tent to wait out the night in a cold sweat. Lefert was never found. In 1929, another gold prospector, Angus Hall, vanished without a trace. In 1931, prospector Phil Power's cabin was also found burned to the ground with such unnatural thoroughness that there was very little left of Powers himself. What they did find did not include a head. In 1936, 2 more men, Mulholland and Epler, disappeared into the woods. In 1940, a man named Holmberg was found dead. In 1945, another miner, this one from Toronto, was found dead in a sleeping bag, also headless. Around the same time, an experienced trapper named John O'Brien suddenly went missing. After a search, he was finally found next to a campfire, frozen to death, matches still in hand. It looked like he had been flash frozen in place. Like he was in the middle of doing something and just instantly froze. In 1949, a man named Schobach was also found in his cabin. His diary showed that after 43 days without food, he wrote "Dead Man Here" on a piece of paper, nailed it to the cabin door, and went inside. At some point before 1962, a man committed suicide by setting off dynamite strapped around his waist. Holy. Oh. In 1962, an aircraft pilot miraculously survived a crash into the valley. He set up a camp a short distance from where the plane went down. According to his diary, he was well provisioned and confident that it would be only a matter of time before he was rescued. But though he's only 6 miles from his destination and planes constantly flew overhead in search of him, he was never found. After about 50 days, his diary entries ended abruptly. His body was never recovered. By 1969, there were up to 44 recorded disappearances. In 2005, 2 experienced bushmen, David Horsey and Frederick Hardesty, vanished from their cabin. They were found a month later in places that the search party had already combed through multiple times over. David in thick brush with unexplained burns on his arms, and Fred floating in the river. Now, again, that's another thing. If you're into any of the cryptid stuff like that with people going missing in like national parks, that's something that they generally not they, but a lot of people would contribute to like a Bigfoot attack or like something like that. Because they'll search this area for days and not find a thing. They don't find a scrap of anything. And then all of a sudden, they'll come back through that same spot and find somebody. They're all beaten up. They're crushed, twisted up in some weird way. But they weren't there the day before when like 100 people walked through there. Very odd. Very odd. And again, I know I've plugged it before. I would highly recommend the Missing 411 book series. Get the books. Get at least one of the books and buy it directly from I don't remember the name of the website. But if you're going to buy them directly from there, because Amazon, they're going to charge you double what you would pay if you just ordered it directly from the author's publisher. Ask me how I know. Their families were not happy with how the investigation into their deaths went. And they were pretty unnerved and didn't have any closure at all. David's stepbrother said this, quote, "There were bullets shot all over the place and there was a gunshot in the floor. The picture is bigger than just 2 guys, one who died of hypothermia and the other who died of drowning. There was something else that happened before all that came down." Yeah, there was. It sounds like something tried to get into their cabin and they tried to fight it off and they probably lost. Another woman, this one named May Lafferty, disappeared from a hunting party with her in-laws. Search parties found articles of clothing left one by one as she walked off into the woods. Her trail disappeared in impossible places along cliff edges or the banks of the stream rushing too fast to get close to, only to reappear further on or on the other side of these creeks. Like a few of the others, Lafferty was never found. Besides being a hotspot for uncanny deaths, the Nahanni Valley is also a hotspot for sightings of strange lights and quote-unquote aerial phenomena and UFOs. Obviously, this means that quite a few people blame the disappearances on aliens or extraterrestrials or interdimensionals or whatever. Then there's ghosts, which possibly the vengeful spirits of the Naha, who knows? Some others suggest that the valley may be a place where the veil is a little bit thinner, or even that it's an entrance to the hollow earth, which we have to do the hollow earth at some point because that is wild. But those aren't the only possibilities. In addition to the Dene mentioning what they called white walkers and spirits shrieking in the dead of night, they also told stories of fearsome, hairy giants who used to live in the caves in the canyon walls. Giants, for lack of a better term, were led by a pale chiefess that would kill and eat anyone who set foot in their territory. The hairy men might also just be your stock standard Bigfoot, who have been reported multiple times in the valley. Or maybe people are confusing them with a long-thought extinct bear dog creature called the Wahila, which is a native name for something called the Amphicyonidae. I'll just post a picture of it because I can't pronounce it. I don't speak Greek. What the do you think I am? um, which has also been sighted there fairly recently, actually. I mean, and why not? There's also rumors of mammoths and mastodons. The Nahanni Valley is crawling with cryptid sightings. Not just cryptids, like I said, with the mammoths and mastodons, and even that bear dog, those are all creatures that we know existed. Those are all things that we think were extinct, even though it blows my mind to think that at the same time the pyramids were being built, there was still packs of woolly mammoths. And if they're in an area where they have a food source, they're unmolested by man, who knows? I mean, a giant predatory animal could definitely exist there. With the population of deer and moose and bears and stuff like that, a large predatory animal could absolutely exist there, which means that a large non-predatory animal could absolutely exist there if it has the correct food source, which, judging from pictures of this place, it might. um, in addition to everything else that's going on, the Nahanni Valley is a bit of a geographical oddity. Along the path of the river are multiple hot springs which create warmth and allow things like cherries and roses to grow, even in the subarctic winter. This little mini, people have referred to it as an oasis, could support the life of any number of mammals. It also calls out to cold, helpless, stupid humans, beckoning them to walk into the swirling, sulfur-scented mist. So I guess now would be a decent enough time to tell you that the other name that the Nahanni Valley has is the Valley of Headless Men, uh, which is metal. Like, that's a really cool name. But yeah, that whole thing with the hot springs, if you're freezing, if you've got, what's that called? The paradoxical undressing that people do when they have hypothermia, where they think that they will warm up if they take their clothes off. There's a hot spring. I'm going to go get in that and warm up until you realize it's like 250 degrees and it boils you alive like a giant lobster. And that happens pretty frequently. There was a guy, he was like 2014 or 2015 in Yellowstone, I think, that jumped into one of the hot springs and it was like 500 degrees and it immediately killed him. Because he thought it would be cool to like film a 2014, 2015, film a Vine or something like that, if anybody remembers that. But yeah, I wanted to do a little trek into the Canadian wilderness, up into the wilds, because it's been cold here lately. As I'm recording, it's about 4 degrees outside, which, I mean, I'm sure it's colder there, but, you know, and wanted to do something weird because I like doing weird stuff, and we haven't done weird stuff in quite a while. It's been a couple of months since we've done anything weird, so we did something weird today. With that being said, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/1159media. $5 a month gets you access to all of the premium programming that we bring here at 1159 Media. You get early access to History Goon, Guessnicity with Luther, Almost Fiction with Chase, The Never Daily with Sam and Chase, 911 calls with the operator. All that for $5? That's pretty good. And I know personally I'm going to start working on some other content to put up there, and maybe potentially branch out. If you'd like to support the show directly, you can head over to Ko-Fi. That's ko-fi.com/historygoonpod. Any donations made there go directly to me, and they are greatly appreciated. You don't have to. I'm not going to beg you. I'm not going to digitally panhandle. I'm not going to sit out here and rattle my cup. But if you want to throw me a couple bucks, that's awesome, and I'd appreciate it. So, next week, we are going to a sporting event. Well, many sporting events. We're going to follow an athlete around who also just happened to be completely out of his mind. And I don't know, on a couple of occasions committed like attempted murder or at least like assault with a deadly weapon, whatever you want to call it. But it's going to be fun because he's crazy. And there's a really fun story about Sprite. But we'll get there when we get there. And until then, we're all going to die someday. So go out and do some goon shit and leave a mark on the world. Just like whatever is eating people's heads in Canada. Okay, love you. Bye.